So one question I've got is, how much can you average as a lease operator at Prime per week? This is not an easy, there's not like a number. It basically it's determined on how you operate your business, on how you run your lease. And what I mean by this is, how fast do you drive? How well do you plan your trips and your routing? Do you make sure that you've always keeping yourself in the best possible situation for your fleet manager to get you the best possible run? A lot of times people will fail at this, or they won't do very well, and they'll blame Prime, they'll blame their fleet manager. My advice, if you're here at any other company and you're not making the money you think you should make, first off, before you immediately go deciding it's the company, take a good, hard, honest look at what you're doing and make sure you're not screwing up. Okay, I got off on a tangent there. Sorry about that. So back to what can you make per week as a driver, as a lease operator with Prime. You can make pretty decent money. Now, I'm not going to be one of these guys that, you'll never see me do a breakdown of my settlement or to tell you I made this much, I made that much. I'll tell you, what a very good week. Last week was a pretty good week. I'll keep it fairly general because I don't want people coming into this thinking, I watched this Flynn guy's videos and he said I can make this much money doing this. And then he doesn't make that much money, and then all of a sudden I've given bad information. It's not how it works. It depends on what you do here at Prime. Are you going to be an instructor? For every student you instruct, if they get through the entire year program, I think it's right around $3,000 extra. So if you had, 10 students finish out their year contract from your truck, you got them their CDL and then somebody else trained them. All you did was get them their CDL and test them out. And they stayed for the entire year. If you did 10 of them at $3,000 a student, that's an extra 30 grand you made that year. If you are a T&T trainer, or as you take somebody who has their CDL, has just gotten their CDL, and you basically drive as a team with them, teach them the ropes. I did that, and I've seen some ridiculous checks doing that. There was also some weeks, to be real honest, my trainee made more money than I did. So it's a fluctuating thing, and as a lease operator, it's a game of averages. You have to run and do your best for about 6 months and then run an average. And the reason I say 6 months is because this will potentially give you 3 months in a good quarter and 3 months in a bad quarter. If you don't understand how the quarters work, usually the first quarter is not very good at all. January, February, March are usually pretty light on freight, with January being one of the rougher months of the year, if not the roughest month of the year. Now, the second quarter, April, May, and June is usually a really good quarter. July, August, September, not that great of a quarter. The final quarter of the year is usually a pretty good one. So basically what I'm getting at is if you do a 6-month average, then basically if I'm going to break it down, 3 months in a good quarter and 3 months in a bad quarter, and then you can run an average. What did you average per week? Basically, if I'm going to break it down, here's kind of the deciding factors of what you make. Okay, do you control your fuel mileage and, get your fuel costs down? That's the biggest thing you can do. Second, how much home time do you take? How frequently do you take home time, and how long are you at home? Now, if you can work it out, which is what I'm trying to do, to where every 2 or 3 weeks, take a 34-hour break, and every couple months, then maybe you take a week vacation, you're probably going to make more money than the person that once a month is taking 5 or 6 days off. Because, as a lease operator, you always have a fixed cost due. The third thing, whether or not you're going to train and instruct. All of these things figure into what you're making. So these people that tell you can make this much or average this much or I make this or I'm not saying they're lying and I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just not going to say some blanket statement of what you can make. My thing would be, if you're coming into this, temper your expectations. Do not think you're going to make $100,000 a year as a lease operator. You're probably not. Now, I'm not saying it's beyond possibility, but as a solo, non-instructing, non-training driver, you're probably not going to hit that number, and I would question anybody who tries to say that you are going to hit that number. What I would say is a general rule is if you're making less than $40,000 a year at Prime as a lease operator, you're messing up. You're not doing things right. You're driving too fast. You're taking too much home time. You're not allowing yourself to be available. You're turning down too many runs. You're just not doing things right. If you're making 60 grand or better, then you're probably doing everything right. And that's just, like I said, I'm very reluctant to give a number because everybody's going to do this a little bit different. And really starting out, you've got to kind of figure out Prime's system and the best way to run your business. I wouldn't expect to make really good money until you've been doing this for, a minute. So you can kind of figure everything out. A lot of people will get really obsessed about, the rate per mile of a run or something. Well, if you're on the East Coast, you're trying to go west, you're not going to make that good of money, but you probably made pretty good money going into the East Coast. All of these factors got to be kind of figured into it. All right, well, I've kind of rambled and this has bounced everywhere, but that's just kind of, temper your expectations is the biggest thing, and just learn how to run a lease. If you're a trainee and you're with a lease operator, learn everything about driving the truck. That's your first priority. But then pick their brain on how they run their truck, especially if you've got a trainer who seems happy with Prime and happy with the money he makes. Now, if you've got a trainer that's always that's always getting advances and always like chasing his tail and talking about being in the negative and freaking out about money, don't ask him a single thing about how he runs his business. You do not want to do what he does. Absolutely. All right. Well, I think I've talked enough about this topic. Thanks a lot, guys, for listening. I'm out.